I'd like to call to order this work session of the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education. Laura, could you call the roll, please?
This call is now being recorded.
That was me. Garcia.
Here.
Gebhardt.
Here.
Niznik.
Here.
Rajpal.
Here.
Sargent.
Here.
Sweeney Moran.
Here.
Zis.
Here.
Thank you.
So the first order of business, I think, is a presentation from our Dak Executive Board, and I believe they're all on Zoom. So I'll turn it over to them to introduce themselves. I think I see Jorge up there. Hi, Jorge. They have the screen hanging right above my head, but I can see you if I look straight up. So anyway, thank you for being here. I think you're the only one I see actual picture of, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Jorge.
All right, thank you very much. That's quite reassuring that you can kind of quasi-see me, hopefully not too threateningly over your head. I'm here representing Dak, as is Christopher Haynes. Our other two members, I don't believe we'll be able to make it this evening, so we'll be here. We appreciate you inviting us to kind of share in this kind of work session to think about priorities for the remainder of this academic year, and I want to welcome the new board members as well. I know that this represents a shift potentially in terms of focus and interest. So thanks for the time. I'd like to start off by talking a little bit about what we've been working on this year. We changed the structure of the DAC meetings this year a little bit, given that most of our meetings, or I guess all of our meetings to this point have been online, and to allow the DAC membership to really kind of work on their priority areas in terms of our subcommittees of focus. Our membership is broken up into 4 subcommittees focused on budget recommendations, on policy recommendations, family engagement, and membership recommendations, and then the UIP data subcommittee focused on those recommendations. And so what we've been doing is we're meeting as a full DAC membership 4 times throughout the year, and the other DAC meeting times have been used for subcommittee meetings to allow the subcommittees to work on their priority areas. And so we provided the budget report at the board meeting last month, and that was the output from the budget subcommittee that worked out all through the fall to work on that. That structure has really kind of, I think, been beneficial to prevent the kind of long hours on Zoom to just kind of listening to report outs from various individuals. It allows the committee members to kind of connect a little bit and kind of focus on engagement and to ease the load of the work. It's been such a crazy year for all of you and for us as well. So what we've been working on so far this year, in terms of the budget, you received the budget recommendations, and we changed our strategy this year to talk about not just a recommendation for the following year, but the need for a more long-term strategy. We felt that it was a way we could facilitate, provide some guidance to the board about not so much about what should be done, but about how to approach some of the work in terms of kind of hearing from stakeholders and bringing in experts and really kind of try to lighten the load for the issues that are rising in the coming years. In terms of some of our other subcommittees, we've been working in terms of family engagement. Our family engagement subcommittee met with Sam Messier. We know she's been doing an inventory of partnerships across the district. So we've been trying to connect better with her to get a sense of kind of what voices are being heard, where there might be gaps, where there might be overlaps and kind of siloed membership issues in terms of partners across the district. So we're working with her on some of those issues. And I know our policy subcommittee that Chris Haynes has been working with have been focusing on family engagement policy as well, working with Kathleen Sullivan on those issues. In terms of the UIP and the data, we've been working in 2 directions here. In one sense, going down to the SACs to help them be more comfortable working with data with the principals. And so we've been working on developing a data dictionary to help facilitate the reading, understanding, and the use of data at the school level across the district. And then thinking up with the district, thinking about what we need to do to continue monitoring the UIP moving forward, especially given the disruption for the last couple of years. We know we're switching to a new calendar next year, so thinking about how that's going to change the rhythm of the DAC membership, but also about how we can kind of get a restart on the assessment that we have been able to do across the district the last couple of years. And so that's kind of what we've been focusing on thus far. Chris, is there anything that you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, thanks, Jorge. I appreciate that summary, and thanks to the board for having us here tonight. That was a great summary, and I think the work that we've been doing both on the policy subcommittee and the family engagement subcommittee, as Jorge said, we think is really in alignment with some of the larger district initiatives, like what Assistant Superintendent Messier is working on. And so we're keen to continue finding those opportunities for intersection and for affinity, so that we can think about this overall push toward family and parent engagement holistically, and not as different sort of separate atoms. So that's something where we're trying to drive that forward on the policy front and gain some input and feedback from a variety of different district and community and parent group stakeholders. And we're looking to continue to find ways to bring those tendrils together and make sure that we're contributing toward that larger effort.
Thanks, Chris. And one thing I did want to add also, in terms of budgeting, I know that there was differentiated funding that was proposed for this year, and there's a review process for that. And so as part of the DAC membership, we encourage all of our DAC representatives to really work with their SACs, to work with the principals to provide feedback on those measures, and then that kind of channeled down to make sure there was participation across the board on that. So that was another kind of critical area that the DAC membership kind of served on this year. At this point, we've got 3 meetings left. We have our March meeting, which is a full membership meeting. So we'll have everybody kind of come together. We're expected to be hearing some updates on the UIP metric implementation and the new calendar for next year. We've been talking to Superintendent Anderson about getting a better focus on the strategic plan and where we are in terms of the larger projects across the district with the strategic plan to make sure everything's aligned. And that's going to happen at our March meeting. Our April meeting is going to be a subcommittee meeting, where we'll be able to work in the small groups to progress on the issues that we're working on. And then our last meeting is in May, where we'll come back together as a full membership to close out the year. And so I think that's kind of what we have in the works right now. We'd like to get a better sense from the board in terms of what the priorities are with what the little time we have left for this year, and where we can kind of be of best service, I think, moving forward.
So is that an invitation for questions now from, I didn't want to cut you off, so is that?
Yes, that would be great, thank you.
Okay, so, sorry, we have to fix the seating next time, Jorge, because it's just a little awkward.
I completely understand.
I know, but it's just. Yeah.
It's so loud.
It's all good. I'm just struggling with where I'm supposed to look. Anyway, so Richard, let's start off with you.
Thanks, Kathy. Jorge, I'm very interested in the family engagement portion of your report. Did your subcommittee or did DAC identify any issues currently around family engagement? And if they have, could you maybe give us a little bit of an overview in terms of what that could be or what it might be? I know that you talked a little bit about policies, especially around family engagement policies that are currently in the books right now as it relates to Title I schools. And I'm not sure whether that policy now extends to all schools or not, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you, Richard. I appreciate that question. I think it's an important issue, and I think I'll start off and I'll let Chris kind of continue with this. But I guess in the general sense, I think we've been having conversations the last couple of years about improving family engagement and outreach. I think there was a sense that messages were being lost and that there weren't lines of communication that were really readily accessible for a number of parents. And I think that's more of a very general sense. There was no systematic, at that point at least, there was no systematic effort to kind of to focus on this. I know over the course of this past year, Messier has been doing outreach to a number of parent and district organizations in the community to get a sense about how they're engaging with the district and how they're communicating with the district to get a ground level sense of where the gaps might be and where the overlaps might be among the different groups. We've been in discussions about the degree to which there are a number of parent organizations that to some degree are siloed or not communicating with each other. And we've been trying to get a sense of kind of what the goals are for each of these parent groups, I think, a little bit. And I think that's kind of where the conversation started. So our subcommittee has been meeting with them, and then Christopher and the policy subcommittee have been looking at the policies more explicitly. So I don't know if you want to add a little bit more about that, Chris.
Yeah, Jorge, thank you. I'm happy to add a little bit of extra context. And Board Member Garcia, thank you for the question. So last year, actually, during DAC, it was identified on the policy subcommittee that BVSD currently has a family engagement policy on the books for Title I schools, as you identified. But BVSD does not currently have a more general policy KB in this case, which there is a sample for in CASB, and many districts around the area have in place, sort of a general non-Title I specific approach to family, parent, and community engagement. So we thought this might be a useful area to explore given the district's priorities and a lot of the parent priorities on building these kinds of relationships. So essentially, the short version is that the DAC subcommittee started drafting some language toward a policy KB last year, and then some other review priorities, caused us to deprioritize that last year. We picked it up at the beginning of this year in consultation with Kathleen, and now have produced as a subcommittee a working draft that we'd like to start engaging with other stakeholder groups to gather some feedback on. So right now, our last meeting this winter, we met with Kathleen, and she's going to take our working draft to talk with folks in the district like Ari and Amy Nelson and others who are working in this sort of area to try to continue pushing us toward adoption or at least review of a policy KB that is a more general family and parent engagement policy. So it's been good work on the subcommittee so far. We think this is a good opportunity to bring forward the district's statement and priorities on these issues and fill one of those policy gaps that we identified.
Thank you. Just a follow-up in terms of the community engagement piece, not the family engagement piece, just the community engagement piece. I know that we're scheduled to receive some updates on our strategic partnerships, I think in June, but maybe sooner. One of the things that I've been kind of looking at personally myself here on the board, haven't talked to any of our board members about it, but in looking at community partners, one thing that I had in my head is that it would be worthwhile to look and Sam probably has heard this from me too, is when she's doing her, what do you call it, her eco scan or whatever in terms of community engagement, that she look at organizations, nonprofit or otherwise, that have the mission of the school district in mind to begin with. In other words, those are the people that we want to engage with, or community organizations we want to engage with, and that is how are they going to fulfill the mission of the school district, such as closing the achievement gap, or increasing for family engagement, those kinds of things, because the nonprofits are there, and I'm hoping that when we get our feedback or our update, those things will be taken into consideration. But just a heads up for you guys. I don't know if you've talked about that or not, but just a heads up.
Thank you. I think that's an important issue, right? Thinking about really strategic about where partnerships can be found. And I don't believe we've kind of heard on that front just yet. We're waiting to hear what the results of the inventory were as a first step for that. But I know that's something that we've discussed previously. It was kind of part of our budget recommendations as well, right? That we need to kind of look to the community as well, that the burden isn't strictly on the school district, and that there are resources we can leverage in the community that can speak to this. So I think that's really important.
Anything else, Richard?
No, I'm okay for now. If another question is not made, I will come back, okay? Because
Sure.
I do have another question in mind, but I'll let.
Okay. Anyone else have questions for? Oh, Nicole.
So it sounds like with the meetings you have left, you have adequate work to get you through the year. Question I have for you is there anything that you need from the board to help you with that work or help you thinking about next year?
Thank you. I really appreciate that question in terms of what we need. I'm not sure we really discussed it in that sort of way. We appreciate the support you've shown us over this past year. We recognize it's been trying for all of us, and so we've been trying to kind of channel the energy of our membership. And I think in our mind, probably just getting a sense of the priorities for you in terms of where you want to see this district go and what you see as next steps, and what kind of role we can play to facilitate some of that. I think some of these discussions around family engagement and better communication to marginalized members of our community have kind of started from the conversations that we've had with you as the board and we've had internally. I think the DAC membership has been really on board with the direction that the district is going in terms of addressing accountability and greater transparency in terms of access to data and providing feedback as changes are moving forward. And so I think that's been really positive. And in terms of the UIP and strategic plan, to really focus on addressing these achievement gaps as a means of lifting all individuals within their school district, right, to make sure that they're all being served. And I think those kind of really kind of remain our priorities. We also appreciate the work that's been done in terms of the transition to remove the SRO officers and to kind of really invest in very proactive interventions and restorative justice. So we'd like to continue to see that work moving forward. And so I think to the degree that we can find ways to facilitate that, provide feedback and channel resources and ideas, I think that will be helpful to us.
Thanks.
Kitty or Beth? Lisa?
Yeah, thank you. You're right, this is very awkward. I hear you saying that you're set for the next few months, and that makes sense. I do want to suggest, I think it took us a while to get to our first DAC meeting this year, Rob, and maybe we can either look at an end of May or an August meeting to talk about work plans for 22-23 school year, and sort of plan that year ahead as a team. I think if I'm not mistaken, was our first meeting with DAC this year, was it end of first semester? I didn't think we got an early one. So I think if we're talking about agenda setting and about things that DAC can work on and that things the board wants to do, either getting them in late May or early August when they're setting their own agenda would probably be ideal rather than trying to sort this out in February.
Yeah, I think that because of the Marshall fires and because we, those things kind of got a little bit out of order. Typically, it's the first or second meeting of the semester is when we try to meet with DAC leadership. But are you suggesting that we do something at the end of this semester prior to next semester?
I don't know, and that wasn't a criticism. We all know things have been crazy. But yes, it's difficult to sort of talk in February about what could we do for the rest of the year. I do think maybe end of May would be one idea. I think the question for me is maybe just a DAC question. Would it be more helpful to get guidance at the end of this semester so that it can be considered over the summer and be part of a planning process for the next year, or is doing it in August or September fine?
I do think that it's helpful to have our prioritization. So I meet with DAC exec pretty regularly, and I'm able to then communicate to them exactly the work that's happening based on the prioritization that we do together. So without that, it would just be speculative. So I do think that there's a sequencing prioritization, then meeting with DAC to see how can our district accountability committee partner with the board, partner with the district to begin to think about the work that's happening. And I think that's what Jorge was discussing earlier. But I do think, so I would say that would have to be after prioritization. I think that makes the most sense.
Well, I'm not trying to suggest where we should stick it in the calendar. I think my overall point is just that it would be great to feel in the upcoming years that I think the board is coming out in front and working with DAC on agenda setting, and that we're sort of agreeing on what projects should be completed rather than getting filled in afterwards on what's been accomplished.
I agree. I agree that better syncing up and that partnership is important.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great point. And this year's been, we'll say, unique, right? and so, but I think to the degree that we can get some lag time right and have a plan kind of coming into the year, I think that's really helpful. So we know what's coming down the pipeline and the deadlines, and have time for our membership to really kind of dig in a little bit to what the priorities are.
Anyone else? So my question, Jorge, is given the subcommittees and the really good work that sounds like they're coming out of it, is it your plan then to have presentations from them to the DAC and then to the board, or is it just kind of ongoing work? I understand the policy work around the family engagement. I'm just trying to get a sense of what, at the end of the year, when you have your meeting, if they'll report out to you and then you'll send to us, or just kind of what you're thinking along that. I know you've already told us about budget, but I'm just thinking about the other subcommittees because they sound like they're doing really important and engaging work.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think we're kind of in an off year for the UIP data, so I think it's be more of an update. And I think in family engagement, it's really kind of ongoing work. But I think that come May, we could definitely put together a memo that kind of outlines the work that we've done this year and where we see it moving for the following year, right, in terms of the transition. If that will be helpful to the board, and that we can use that as a jumping off point for the following year as we transition.
That sounds like at least a good starting point for us, because then we can all figure out. I just don't. I'd love to have the board stay engaged with all the work that you're doing, and I don't want to create more work for you to do that. So I think if you guys are comfortable with that, that might be a good place to start at least. So thank you. And it looks like Richard might have another question.
Just very quickly, Jorge. We looked at the SRO situation and we created the Equity Council to look into it. And you all also got the charge to look into the same question and you both came back with recommendations and pretty similar recommendations. And we also have in the district some pretty well organized district groups like CAPO and the Equity Council, et cetera. And I don't know whether the Boulder Parent Council comes up with recommendations on priorities or not, but I know that these other two have. Is there any conversations that you're having with either one of these or with these groups to kind of look at other priorities that other groups are coming up with?
That's a great question, and I think that's kind of part of why we like the motivation for this kind of partnership inventory, to get a sense of what the different groups are that are involved with the district, to see where there's potential opportunities for overlap. I think at this point, they're either kind of siloed or they're kind of informal ways of doing that. So right now I'm serving as the chair of DAC, but I'm also a member of COPL. And so I report out when I go to COPL meetings in terms of kind of where the DAC is at and the work that we've been doing. And then I use that information from COPL as a means of kind of enriching our discussions as part of the DAC as well. Part of the changes that we proposed last year to the membership to allow individuals to join from the community was an attempt to kind of try to bridge some of this a little bit, to facilitate members from some of these other committees to serve on DAC, even if they're not formally affiliated with the School Accountability Committee, in an interim role. So we've been trying to do outreach in that direction to kind of get some of these new groups better connected to the DAC and to get a sense of the work that's going on, especially since many of these new groups that Dr. Anderson has kind of put together have really kind of risen the voice of kind of more marginalized groups that haven't necessarily been members of this group historically. Does that kind of answer your question? Or
Yeah. Thanks, Jorge.
Then I had just one more follow-up question. You're encouraging the SACs to meet with their principals kind of so we can start to collect some data on the impact of the differentiated funding. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Is it just to inform the SAC parents, or what is that? What are you thinking along those lines?
Thank you for that question. I think the way it worked out was that, there were conversations with you and with Superintendent Anderson about the differentiated funding. We recognized that there was a need for parental feedback in terms of the development of the proposals for differentiated funding. And so we encouraged our SAC members to be a key contributors to that proposal process. At the time, I don't believe there was any kind of formal requirement that there be any feedback or any kind of metrics in terms of the outcomes of this. But that's something that we've been talking about in discussions about encouraging our DAC members on the SACs to push or encourage the principals to kind of to do assessment, right, and see what's working, what's not working, and to more formally kind of structure this. We haven't really developed at this point a formal way of doing that within the DAC to get a sense of what's going on. But that's something I think that we would be interested in looking into moving forward.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that as that work goes forward, you and the exec meets with you, Rob, you guys can, so we're not repeating each other and stepping on each other's toes, we can figure out how we look at that, because it's really exciting work, and I just love to see what kind of consequences and, positive outcomes that we're getting from that. So does that make sense, Jorge?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. I think that's great.
I don't see any other questions, so we appreciate you coming, and it's really exciting how you've structured it and the issues that you're looking into, and we just look forward to our continued partnership. So let us know, as Nicole said, what we can be doing to help you, and Rob has a question.
Just not a question, more of a comment. I want to thank Jorge and Chris and all of DAC Executive Board. I know John Closby was unable to, and Jamila Richmond were maybe unable to be here this evening. They've been great partners in the work. I think a great district accountability committee is one that our leadership can continue to engage. They can engage the board, and we work together to get better. And I know that that's all of our goal, that we want to make sure that each and every student in the Boulder Valley School District gets the opportunities and outcomes that we're all desiring. And I just really appreciate the partnership and the leadership in DAC Exec. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to publicly thank them.
And I think we all share in that, because we know you guys are investing a lot of your time in this work, and we really deeply appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So next, Rob, we have the budget update. Is that right? Is Bill appearing remotely, or?
Yes, Bill is appearing either invisibly or remotely. I think it's remotely. There he is. Look at that. All right, Bill.
Hi, Bill.
We'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. All right. So this evening we have
Volume down. You are like blasting us out of here with the volume, so just hold on 1 second. It's not your fault. We're just trying to turn the volume down.
Bill, try whispering.
Kathy and I are sitting under like 7 speakers, and it's, you're making my toes are rumbling right now.
All right, try again.
How's that?
Much better. Thank you.
Okay. This is important information, but the neighbors do not need to hear it. So we have the sort of next step in our budget development process for next fiscal year, which is the second quarter financials and mid-year analysis for the current year. So in the past, I have gone through the financial statements, which are about 50 pages of information. And so this time I decided to put together a little slide deck that will hopefully make it a little easier to follow and have a little bit bigger printing and a little easier to read. So that's showing up all right. There we go. So first, just a quick reminder on our typical timelines and milestones. Nice big bright line, red line here in the middle where we are right now. This is the mid-year financial review and the February 15th work session, as has been indicated the numerous times I've presented this. So with that, I'll step into the financial statements, an overview of it. So we did cover this with the audit committee last week. We met and went over the financial statements in detail. So this will be pretty high level, just a few comments, and then certainly we can go and look at any individual pages. I have those ready and I can bring them up if anybody has any questions. So first off, the notes pages that are included in the financial statements. It's pages 4 through 8 for the combined general fund and 29 to 33 for the other funds, as we call them. Those notes really, they're intended to capture and document the conditions that exist at the time that the financial statements are put together and reference any specific information or details as to what the conditions are or why the numbers that are being presented are what they are. So we are seeing good data and trends through December 31. The variances that exist between, so the financial statements always have the current year and the prior year, year to date. So it's the prior year through December, as well as the current year through December. So those variances are explainable, which is sort of an important piece of why you have those comparative years, so that you can see if there are significant differences and be able to explain them. It is a little tricky this year in that looking back into just the prior year, there are some significant impacts that occurred last year. So the federal grants, as well as what the fall of 2020 looked like from how we were operating, right? We worked remote for a while, our school was remote for a while. So we had to do a little comparison back into the couple of prior fiscal years to get a more comparable 6 months of operations. So we did talk about the impacts of the Marshall Fire on the assessed value of the area. You know, as devastating and just massively impactful as that has been and will continue to be for our community in Boulder Valley in general, as well as the specific communities of Superior and Louisville, the calendar year 2021 valuations won't be significantly impacted because it's based at the time of the year, December 30th, it's only 360 bits worth of value of those homes. So the tax collections for any home that has a mortgage would have been already collected and put into escrow and paid by the mortgage companies. There could be some possible timing issues, but they should be corrected with abatements and the certification of mill levies that will happen in December of 22. That there's several months worth of the county treasurer being able to reset and make new projections, and when we get to that December timeframe, we'll have accurate numbers, and the mill levies will be adjusted to reflect that. The potential impact is also only about 1% or less than 1% of our net assessed value, or NAV. So we have a really well-balanced assessed value of property within the district, both residential and non-residential. So that helps to support our local collections throughout the district.
So,
we do have
Bill,
one. Yep.
Do you want us to wait till the end to ask questions, or as we go along?
Whatever your pleasure.
Well, because I just had a question and I didn't want to forget it. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but you use such neutral terms that it made me anxious about adjusting the mill. I mean, do you really think it's going to go up with $1 billion impact from the fire? I get that it's 1%, but I'm just, when you said that, I just am wondering if you could gaze into your crystal ball and tell me what you think that's going to look like in December of '22.
So $1 billion in actual value is much less in assessed value. So we'll put that piece out there as well. I guess a really good example would be our payments for our bonded debt. So we have a particular dollar amount that we need to meet and collect to make those principal and interest payments. So we will set the mill levy to collect that particular dollar amount. The changes would be very, very minor, if there is any, and some of it might be, with increasing values overall in the area, that it may offset it completely. So it's really difficult to project at this point in time. But in talking to the Boulder County Treasurer, it was really felt that it will be very minor in the processing of creating those mill levies.
So you're,
Does that help?
well, so to summarize, the impact of the Marshall Fire on our mill levies and I get that assessed value is different than actual value. You're saying is going to be almost de minimis?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Kitty has a question.
Go ahead.
The bullet point, possible timing issue with abatements and certifying mill levies. What are abatements?
So folks can file challenges to their taxes, things like that. Their credits and abatements kind of go together. And so we apply a separate mill levy. Again, the counties, the 3 counties that we deal with, Broomfield, Gilpin, and Boulder being the largest, tells us what that number is, and we set a mill, and the board certifies the mill that collects that amount of money that they tell us we are owed.
Thank you. Thank you. So, and I also want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, is that most of what you've been talking about has been for last calendar year, which is the money we're going to get this calendar year. Is that correct?
Correct. We collect our property tax revenues to operate the current year mostly in the second half of the fiscal year. So we'll start collecting now.
But you're also saying that you don't think the impact of the fire is going to be that great for 2022 taxes that we will receive in 2023. Is that correct?
Correct. Both
Okay.
of them.
Thanks. Just wanted to make sure I got it.
Yep. And so I can't see anybody on the screen, so Kathy, please make sure you speak up if somebody does have a question and they're raising their hand.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'll just keep rambling.
You should just keep going and I'll interrupt you like I just did if there's a question.
Perfect. Okay, so I do note on here that we have one mill levy override that is a fixed mill. Our other mill levy overrides are set for a particular dollar amount. The Operations and Technology Fund is set at 4 mills. And so that one could see a little bit of an impact if there is any, and again, this will be very slight, but it could be that there's less of an increase if the total assessed value doesn't grow as much as it might have otherwise. It's pretty nuanced to think about, but overall the summary is that it's likely to not be a dramatic impact to the Boulder Valley School District in the revenue collection. So that's it for the financial statements. Again, there's 50 pages of schedules and notes and other comments in there. I can certainly go back and dig through any of those, but I'll just jump into the mid-year analysis because that's really the major component of this budget development process to start the conversation for next year. So just a couple of notes on the mid-year analysis. So the main focus is on the general operating fund. We do look at all of the other accounting funds, and we mention them if appropriate. So historically, in the mid-year analysis, the years that we were seeing revenue impacts from the pandemic related to childcare or food service operations, we were making notes and comments and adjustments related to that. But for this year, it's really not, there's nothing in the other funds that are being commented on. We also use this process to identify areas to monitor in the current fiscal year. So in the event that an expenditure line item was tracking off of what we expected out of the budget, we would use the opportunity to make a course correction in the current year if needed. It also allows us to anticipate some of the year-end balances that might be available for next fiscal year for budget planning. If there are needs to make adjustment in the next fiscal year, so there's both the current fiscal year adjustments if needed, but also the next fiscal year. So in the event, which I would say I wouldn't let happen, but in the event that we were pacing higher than budget on, say, salaries and benefits, that would be an indication that we would need to adjust the budget next year to meet that obligation for the staff that we had in place. And then it's also an opportunity for us to improve budget projections in the event that there are any tweaks that are needed. So on the revenue side, total revenues are projected in the general fund. Again, we're talking about the general fund, are projected to be at 100.9% of budget. When we built the revised budget in late December, November and December, and what we brought forward to the board in January, we rebalanced all of the revenue line items with the latest information from the October count, and the variance that we're projecting is from the state supplemental budget, and is outside of what we rebalanced there. So it's the state supplemental budget that is getting passed, if it hasn't been already, has allocated additional resources to K-12. So that's where this additional revenue is coming from. No other significant revenue variances from budget are expected.
So Bill, did we get anything from the supplemental?
If you wait 1 second, it'll show up here in a table. But yes is the short answer, and we'll get to the exact dollar amount in a minute. Total expenditures are projected at 98% of budget. Compensation are projected to be less than budget. Operational expenditures, so non-personnel expenditures, we assume to be expended fully by year end. So we look at utilities in particular as a budget line item that we don't have too much control over, but things like textbooks and school resource allocations and operating dollars within departments, everybody is authorized to expend, or all the managers of those resources are authorized to expend those dollars, so we project that they will be spent out. And so that's included within that table that's attached to it. So again, this is kind of repeating that. Schools and departments manage those budgets to the fiscal year end. So we don't try to guess at an underspending of any particular department or school. And then those unspent dollars, I noted SRA, school resource allocation, textbooks, equipment, supplies, whatever, typically be carried over into the next fiscal year through that carryover process. So they're a committed resource at that point and not really available to be spent. So it sort of removes some of the confusion as to how much money might be available. So when we're projecting what we have available, it's truly resources that we believe can be started to be talked about to be used in the next fiscal year, or the current fiscal year for that matter. We fully expect, so even though the attachment of the in the agenda item that has the schedule that shows, you know, zero balance or zero variance in some of the line items, we fully expect that there'll be differences, but as line items are tracked by programmatic area, not necessarily by whether it's a supply or an equipment expenditure type. So we fully expect that there'll be variances, but overall, in total, we don't expect variances for that year-end projection. So here's the table that shows that 3.4 million additional revenue is what we expect to receive out of that supplemental budget. That's that 0.9% over budget. Over budget on revenues is the right way to be. So collecting more than anticipated. And then on the expenditure side, 2% underspending. A little bit over in transfers. This is all has to do with charter schools. So as we collect more revenue on the per pupil revenue side from the School Finance Act, supplemental in that, that will be transferred to charter schools as appropriate. No difference in reserves. And so about just under $10 million additional available, what we're projecting for year end. We had a budget balance of about 6 million, and so it's now total about 16 million. I would say in any grade scaling, extra credit on the revenue side, and a solid A, maybe an A plus on the 98% expenditure side. So when it comes to, you know, making these projections, you know, this is right where we want to be. We don't want extra credit on the expenditure side where you're overspending budgets. We want that on the revenue side and just a little bit under on the expenditure side. So just a quick summary: additional revenue from the state supplemental budget, underspending of compensation, really due to the inability to fill positions, the labor shortage. We looked, and at mid-year, or just after winter break, we had about 40 FTE of unfilled paraeducator positions. And so that's one of the line items that, you know, we just aren't able to fill some of those positions out there. Some of them in the service areas, the custodians, maintenance staff. So some vacancies there is leading to some of that as well. We do have a healthy financial position in the near term. Course corrections in the current year or next fiscal year are not required, as that variability is within the tolerances and coincides with kind of known circumstances of those position vacancies. So with that, I will answer any questions, and I'll stop presenting this and bring, if there are any specific questions on the schedules or the tables, I can bring those up individually and look at that.
My first question is, Rob, can we get these posted, these slides?
100%.
Thanks.
Yes.
Just finished them this afternoon. So.
That's what I figured. I just want to get them posted because they're kind of helpful to go back and look at. So questions? Kitty?
Well, I don't have a question. I just want to say thanks, Bill. The stuff you sent out today was really informative, and so were the slides, and just good job.
Thank you. And it's a whole team. I don't do this stuff by myself by any stretch of the imagination.
Sorry, we're having a discussion about, at the next board meeting, we need to make sure we include on the agenda Beth's appointment to the audit committee, but we have to vote on it, so we need to just put that on the agenda. So that was our sidebar, sorry.
I got
Rob?
confused.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank Bill and his entire team. Let's not take the excellent job that they do for granted. I think there's a lot of work and energy that goes in to make sure that we're being responsible with our dollars. And I think that Bill's team does an incredible job to always let us know where we are, being very transparent to the public, and knowing and understanding the trends. This board is very engaged on finance. There's never a question that Bill can't answer. And so I just want to thank Bill and his team publicly for the great job I think they do.
Thanks, Rob.
There used to be a show on KBCO, it was Stump. Remember that? I think we should play that with Bill. Stump Bill. I don't think we could ever do it. Do you remember? It was on KBCO and yeah.
Brett, what's his name?
Yeah, that's what Nicole's
DJ.
reminded, yeah. Board members, any other questions? Nicole?
I just had a comment. The audit committee met last week and went over this in finer detail, and I was so impressed by our external auditor. She said she tested like 85 samples, all of which came back with no flags, no warnings. That's triple the amount she said she normally tests in an audit due to all the extra grants we received. And so in addition to Bill, our external auditors did a fantastic job, and Bob Smart, who also helps that team, had a lot of great questions, and everybody was able to answer Beth and Armai's question as well as Bob. So you guys are doing a great job. I appreciate all that work.
Thanks, Nicole. And just to note, at the board meeting next week, we will go over the full audit documents. The audit committee reviewed that back in November, and then we just looked at the single audit for the federal programs this last week. And so we'll do both of those together with the auditors, with the full board. We typically do that in December, but the single audit was delayed getting guidance out of the federal government on these programs. So we'll go over that in detail with the whole board next week.
Any other questions? Sorry, I'm getting an echo, Bill. So when will we know if the General Assembly is really serious about paying down the negative factor? And if they are, and they did, let's say they did it over 2 years, this is my hypothetical, what would that bring in for us, Bill?
We are about, the caveat this with no changes to the School Finance Act that would redistribute how dollars flow. So that would be a different assumption within this model. But we're about 3.4% of the total state. Our average per pupil is slightly under the state average. So 3.4% for every 100 million that the negative factor is bought down, it's about 3.4 million for the district. I did see the Craig Harper's Ledge Council staff recommendation included a healthier buy down of the negative factor than what the governor proposed. Whether the General Assembly accepts that or not, it's yet to be seen, but that was certainly a positive indication that it's a real option.
If I remember right, he's talking about buying it down over 2 years, maybe 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And the governor's not
Cutting it in
talking
half.
about buying it down at all. He's talking about making a payment, but not buying it down to zero.
Yep.
Well, any support we can give to the legislature to follow that path, let us know. Any other, because that would be a nice problem to have, is what we could do with that money if it started to come in. Then it would have to be, ongoing. We're not talking about one-time money, which is what Craig Harper's trying to make
Right.
sure is that if we go that route, we aren't having to immediately go back to the negative factor again, so.
Yeah, because there was one time in the governor's proposal, he, paid it forward for 3 years, but it was not specifically ongoing resources in his proposal. And really, it's going to be a wait until the March revenue forecast is really the timing on when we'll know more about that. So March 20th or 21st or the previous Friday or whatever they do it.
And are you hearing conversations around, sorry, did I just not get close? About conversations about spending the ARA funds and how those might come to school districts. They're talking about using ARA funds for the lead and water remediation, and I'm just wondering how we follow those, if at all, or if you're hearing anything about it. If you're not, that's fine. I think it's kind of hit and miss, but there's certainly, the state has a fair amount of ARA money that they could still be allocating to school districts. I get that it's one-time money, but I'm just wondering if you're hearing anything on that.
I haven't heard anything. All I've seen is some of the legislation on the telling us what to do side, not the how do you pay for it side. And the clean water filters proposal that's out there is not that it's not the right thing to do or a good thing to do. It's very expensive as the way it's proposed. And ongoing, because it's 2 filter changes per year and staff time to change those filters and paying consultants to monitor and test. So it could be funded upfront to some extent to set some of that up, but on an ongoing basis that would be an unfunded mandate because there isn't the ongoing revenue.
So maybe as you start hearing things, maybe we could get a presentation by Ernestine if we start to see some more of those coming along. Just because I'm not sure who's following that. I think it's pretty much by topic and by bill and all of that. So, but it could be impactful, like you say, on the unfunded side or the funded side, preferably on the funded side.
Yeah, if there are truly one-time expenses that they can fund with those dollars, that's fantastic. But usually their suggestions are not on a limited basis.
Well, and to your point, what looks to be a one-time expenditure really has ongoing costs that would then fall on the shoulders of the school districts. So we have to be careful about that, even when they are, as you say, really important ideas. But if they're that important, in my opinion, the state should put their shoulder in and help fund that and not just leave it on our shoulders. So, and no other questions. I think we'll look forward to the audit presentation next week. And thanks for keeping us apprised and giving us a great presentation. And we'll see you soon.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Bill. So I think, is there anything else for the good of the order for tonight? I think we're looking forward to a really exciting and important board meeting next week where we have a presentation, right, Rob, from Boulder County Public Health. And so I think, and some audit information. So I think we're going to start seeing fuller agendas as we talked about. So I'm looking forward to that and looking forward to seeing all of you next week. And I also just, I don't think anyone's listening, but thank you for inviting us to the Boulder Tech Open House. It was great to go and to see all the families and to see the excitement in potential families, talking to the professors. And I know that I, along with several of my board members, got pretty excited seeing the cadaver um, and all the other really cool things that were there. So thanks for including us in that. And those kinds of opportunities are really meaningful, and I really appreciated being included in that. Thanks.